Hello and welcome to the NetScaler Podcast. My name is Brian Huhn and I'm joined by my co-host Jason Poole. Together we explore the ins and outs of application delivery and security, deep dive into stories from the industry, and learn about the business challenges that face IT teams and how they overcome them. Today we're going to be looking at app modernization and the OpenShift platform and try to understand better how it interacts with NetScaler and application delivery in general. Jason, can you give us a bit more info on today's topic and introduce our guests?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Applications are a business's most valuable asset. Indeed, I was listening to a reputable analyst only this morning who predicted that 43% of business IT spend in the coming years will be on applications, either buying them or building them. And that makes sense, certainly to me, as they underpin just about every process in a business, as we've discussed previously on this podcast. And today we're going to take a quick tour of how Red Hat, OpenShift, and NetScaler help businesses develop, deploy, and deliver cloud-native applications. Specifically, we want to take a look at why analysts predict there will be 750 million new apps based on this cloud-native technology by 2025, and why businesses are looking at Red Hat's OpenShift platform to deploy, and why many of them are turning to NetScaler to enhance and ensure delivery. And to do this, we're joined by three guests. We've got John Gibson, who's the Global ISV Partner Alliance Manager at Red Hat, and has been working with partners, including NetScaler, over the last 6 years. Giri Venkataraman, an industry professional of 15 plus years experience. He is a solution architect with global ecosystems at Red Hat, and he helps partners develop and market joint solutions. And our very own Komal Bhardwaj, Director of Product Management at NetScaler, who has worn many coats and hats over the last few years, but more recently he's been working very hard on NetScaler in cloud-native environments. So thank you all for taking the time to join us, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Jason.
Okay, I'd like to start with why. Why this great application shift is happening. I recently read a Gartner statistic that said by 2027, 90% of organizations will be running cloud native or containerized applications. So I want to know, or maybe we can just explain for the audience why this is happening, what are the benefits for business, and how's it going to go on. So John, perhaps you take a first pass at that.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at this. So I think there has been a fundamental shift in sort of the way that we think about applications and how we're hosting them. I think for a long time, it's been all about virtual machines, and it's been about this is the way, and this is the way that we're going to do it forever, right? And I think VMware started a lot of that with like server virtualization. So we've had that sort of like mentality for quite some time. But now as we're entering into what I believe is like the next phase of how we're handling applications, really that main push and that main drive has been predominantly around how can we have a more flexible environment for our applications to sit on? How can we connect all of these different silos and these different applications and these various different locations that all these different teams are using? How can we ensure that they're flexible, they're portable, there's some cost savings around it, right? Because traditional VMs and how they're being used today can be considered monolithic, right? They're hard to use. Sometimes they're a little bit static in the way that they can be moved or how they can interact with other applications. And so really, especially as we're moving into a world that is predominantly moving towards a cloud-based architecture, there's a lot of flexibility that organizations want to have, right? So when you decouple the operating system from the virtual machine, that's where the Kubernetes and containers really come into play and provide that flexibility, right? Because you can take those anywhere you want to. So me as an organization or a business owner or an application team, right? If I've got orders from top level executives around, hey, this is the way that our organization is changing, this is the way that we're going to go, we have the means to be able to completely port that over and be able to meet the demands of our business while also meeting the demands of what we are trying to do from an application ownership standpoint. So being able to add new services, building in microservices, connecting APIs to different applications inside the environment to make it a more cohesive experience internally but also ensuring that you're having a better end user customer experience for the applications that they may be accessing that have dependencies on all the backend applications. You need to have something that's got a little bit more dependencies around the entire environment versus just a static VM style approach to it. So we've seen containers be that next gap and where we see the future of infrastructure moving forward for a lot of organizations.
Interesting. So, Komal, I've got a question for you because I know you've worked in this area for a while. Are you also seeing these changes in app deployment, and are you seeing any challenges arising with this shift towards app modernization?
Yeah, sure, Brian. And thank you for that great summary, John. In fact, 2024 is the year when Kubernetes is 10 years old. Kubernetes recently celebrated the 10-year birthday when the first commit was pushed to GitHub nearly in 2014. And so the containers world is now maturing, I would say. Uh, the VMs obviously are the mainstay of application delivery and application hosting, but containers are also becoming mainstream, and I'm seeing that a lot of regulated industry, big banks, healthcare companies are also looking at containers, and they're now asking the new applications to be deployed in the containers and Kubernetes and OpenShift type of platforms. So, at NetScaler, since we've been delivering applications for more than 2 decades, uh, we see a really hybrid setup in some of our largest enterprise customers, where they're using the traditional hardware-based products, they're using virtual machine-based applications, which are actually running on their on-premise or on public cloud. And now, increasingly, the mix of containers is increasing, and that's where we see that the application mix is very hybrid, and it'll and the application delivery is a challenge, and where customers need a solid robust product so that application delivery product can be used across these different type of hybrid application types.
10 years, I didn't realize it's been that long that we've been doing this stuff. So just to reiterate, what I think I'm gathering here is that um, it gives you a lot, breaking the application down into smaller chunks, if you will, helps businesses be a little more creative about how they reconstruct, reassemble these applications to suit their current needs, and that allows them to be flexible and be more competitive and so on. And for me, that's nice and simple from the business perspective, but I imagine that it's really a very complex system, and that's where OpenShift comes in as an application management tool. Is Giri, is that right? Have I captured that? Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about OpenShift and how it helps the businesses manage their applications.
Okay, thank you, Jason, for that context, and it absolutely leads us to that central question of, okay, what is OpenShift, right? And so, if I were to put it in the simplest terms, OpenShift is a complete application platform that is built to deliver your applications to your business and deliver it in, and these are very key words for the delivery of applications: secure, scalable, and a consistent way across these hybrid environments that organizations are encountering today. So, what does that mean, right? So, we talked about Kubernetes. What OpenShift, like I said, when I said it's a complete application platform, it builds. So, you can think of Kubernetes as kind of an engine. What OpenShift offers is a complete vehicle, a complete car. So what does that mean? It means that on top of Kubernetes, you have security and you have stability. And all of this is built on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux Core OS foundation, right? And so you get all that when you come to OpenShift today. So security, stability, a consistency of operation across these varied environments. And that's really what attracts businesses to Red Hat OpenShift when they want to streamline their management of these complex applications, right? So really, I mean, if you look at Red Hat OpenShift, it's really an enterprise-ready platform. You can say an enterprise-ready Kubernetes platform, but again, it offers a lot more than that, and that's something that is a key differentiator for Red Hat today to look at Red Hat OpenShift. from a business standpoint.
Yeah, Giri, if I can chime in as well. Sorry, Jason, to jump in, but I think one of the cool parts about it is specifically with like OpenShift, right? It's built from downstream, or it's built from upstream Kubernetes, right? So it's verified, tested, hardened, right? And Red Hat takes the best pieces of that, right, and incorporates it and ensures it's enterprise ready. But one of the key things that I think really stands about OpenShift, to Giri's point, is like it's enterprise ready, right? So it's out of the box. It's ready for customers to start consuming and start building applications on. But really, and I'm taking the lens from the partner alliance side, we want to make sure to meet customers at where they're at. So if they're leveraging other technologies and other vendors within their environment, right, we have certifications and we've got partnerships with vendors like Citrix and NetScaler to be able to make sure that if customers want to bring their technology that they're leveraging and enhance it with some of these partners' solutions, they can do that, right? So you can mix and match, and that's the real benefit of OpenShift, right? We've got a whole community that's built out an incredible amount of content, an incredible amount of integrations, and vendors like NetScaler and Citrix who have also built out certifications that are jointly supported within the organization to be able to ensure that we're meeting the customer's needs.
I want to go back to Giri's analogy there. Like the Kubernetes is the engine and the whole car. And it's more, it sounds more than that from what you've said, John. It's more than just the bits around the engine that make the car. This is like, this is the service stations and everything that goes with it when you talk about OpenShift.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Jason, the great point you make there, in that there are a few more layers on top of this that we haven't even touched on yet, which is, you talked about managing all these application components. So, like John said, right, we have a vast ecosystem of partners that are certified on OpenShift. So customers can bring their own tooling to OpenShift. OpenShift also comes with an opinionated set of tools. So from a developer standpoint, for example, CI/CD standpoint, and so customers can mix and match based on what's currently part of their ecosystem, what they want to use as part of OpenShift. But let's take this challenge a little bit further, in that OpenShift also comes in flavors of fully managed services, and you can now start thinking about it as a chauffeured service, right? So what really happens is that with our managed services on the cloud, like Red Hat OpenShift services on AWS, or ROSA, for example, or Azure Red Hat OpenShift, these are all completely managed services between the cloud vendor and Red Hat. And what really happens in that case is that you take the management of that service out of the customer's hand, and that burden shifts to Red Hat, and the business can solely focus on what they do best, which is build and deploy their applications and derive that innovative customer experience for their customers.
So maybe I've got a good double click question for you guys. So as I've been reading about app modernization, I've seen that OpenShift is a leader with Gartner in their Magic Quadrant and commands nearly 50% of the market share. So I know you mentioned it's secure, scalable, and consistent, and also, out of the box, enterprise ready. Is there anything else that makes it just so popular?
So I'll chime in, and then Giri, I'll let you go too. So not only just a leader in one Magic Quadrant, we're actually a leader in a few around multi-cloud container platforms, and we were also a challenger for DevOps platforms as well. I would say, like, one of the main things that makes it a very popular solution is around its ease of use, its consistency across some of these different hybrid platforms that Giri mentioned, right? Some of the different managed service offerings, right? One of the key benefits of OpenShift, right, is a click once, deploy anywhere approach, right? So no matter where you're deploying OpenShift, whether you're deploying it on premises, whether you're consuming it in a managed service offering in one of the major hyperscalers, it's the same approach, right? And because it's containers, it's incredibly easy to deploy the applications wherever you want to, right? So if it's compatible on premises, it's going to be compatible in the clouds. And it's coupled with that enterprise support. Again, people love open source software. I mean, this is the foundation that Red Hat was built out. You look at every single organization today, they've got some sort of open source technology within their environment. Whether it's supported on an enterprise level, that's a different conversation, right? But people love open source software. They love the idea around open source contribution to democratize software, where it's been tested and vetted out into the public, right? And it's been hardened through major security testing and also like community approaches to say, we want this inside there. So we're really giving the building of a solution into the hands of the community and the customers to be able to say, hey, this is what we want. This is what we're expecting. Listening and taking feedback in from customers to say, these are the major things that we're looking for out of a solution. Let's have this incorporated. And we'll be able to take that and actually have that vetted through. And I'll also mention again, from the lens of the partner ecosystem side, we've got an incredible partner ecosystem that helps support and just add on to the benefits that OpenShift can provide. So a lot of those things are coupled with that that kind of make OpenShift the product that it is today. Any thoughts from your end, Giri?
Yeah, a great way to kind of segue into this topic, because one of the things that we alluded to before was this whole what makes OpenShift so attractive compared to, for example, other Kubernetes platforms that are out there that are out for customers out there, right? One of the major things that puts it in stark contrast with other Kubernetes platforms is really this whole, you are getting a complete stack on which you're ready to start building your applications from day one, as opposed to if you go to just a Kubernetes platform today, then it becomes the responsibility of the organization to stitch on top of that all these various services that already come built with OpenShift. So you're not just talking about the time and effort to build that stack, but also to maintain and sustain this over the long term. And that takes a toll on the organization. So both from a resources standpoint, as well as from a skill set standpoint. And that is something that cannot be discounted when it comes to OpenShift. So I wanted to just add that one.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll chime in there too, just to kind of hammer the point home, right? It's been proven, right? A recent IDC report came out talking about DevOps productivity, and they concluded they saw 20% higher productivity with OpenShift. Faster time to market for application development was 29% faster. From an efficiency standpoint, 21% higher operational infrastructure efficiency. And from a cost saving standpoint, 22% fewer virtual machines were required to run OpenShift in containers versus standard VM practices. And last but not least, right, when we're looking at customers, especially enterprise customers that are adopting more and more of the container technology, they saw over a 5-year period 636% ROI. So, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, adopting OpenShift and adopting containers. I mean, there's a value to it, and we see that, and it's been proven by analysts time and time again.
Wow. Okay. So if you want to, and you've got the skills, you can go and build your own car, or you can buy one that's pre-built and design it the way you want it. That's okay. That fits with the philosophy, but you can drive it anywhere, because most people don't want to build a car. They want to drive a car, right? So that's good. But I want to now shift a little bit. So application building and deployment are one thing, and that's great. And I think OpenShift is a fantastic tool for that. But equally important, so in my view, and on the previous podcasts that we've done, equally important is resilience and delivery. So I want to take a moment to look at the role of ADCs, such as NetScaler, in cloud-native environments. So Komal, perhaps you can explain why the ADC is such a pivotal piece of the equation in application modernization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I keep talking to a lot of customers who are using OpenShift, and they want to use NetScaler with OpenShift, in conjunction with OpenShift. And the story typically starts like this: that there is a team that is responsible for application modernization, and they have chosen OpenShift as the platform for their application modernization, right? And they're concerned about really choosing the best in class Kubernetes platform, and they've sort of structured their team. They've decided which public cloud, or whether to use it on-prem, etc. But then when they have to actually deliver the application to production or to staging, then they go to the Kubernetes ecosystem, and they see that they need an external load balancer, external ADC. It is actually mentioned on the Kubernetes documentation as well, that to deliver any application, you need an existing external load balancer. So that is where they typically reach out to their IT teams, to their networking teams, and what they see is that NetScaler is already there. Okay. So that's where these two teams start interacting with each other, and and that is where typically the teams share their requirements that, hey, this is the type of my application. I am delivering an HTTP or a TCP application. These are the ports on which I want the traffic to come. This is the type of layer 7 routing that I want, and so on. So there is this sharing of needs and requirements typically between the OpenShift team and the IT and the networking team, and that is what we see in a lot of customers deployments. And that is where over the last 3 to 4 years we have strengthened our partnership with OpenShift, and we have seen how these what are the most popular use cases to be automated, and we have built that stack of automation in the OpenShift operators. And Giri and John were mentioning about this, that they have taken an opinionated view of how to deliver container application. And we have followed those automation principles, and a lot of NetScalers configurations are readily available on different flavors of OpenShift. And the customers just have to go and click and choose the NetScaler operator there and connect it with their existing NetScaler feed.
Yeah, I was going to ask. That's kind of where I was going to lead to. I know that it's key to understand how application delivery works for Kubernetes and containerized environments, but yeah, I was hoping you could maybe share a little bit more of the specific advantages of NetScaler and OpenShift and why it's becoming so popular.
Exactly. Uh, so once these two teams have come together, then typically these teams get into the level two details. They say that, okay, I want to the first thing that I want to do is that the humongous amount of ingress traffic that will be coming, because these apps are typically expected to be accessed by millions and often billions of users across the globe, across different type of networks, etc. So they want secure, reliable, and scalable load balancing, and that is what Giri was also mentioning. That they want the applications to be secure, resilient. They also want that the traffic coming to these applications is routed to the appropriate Kubernetes backend pods, and also if you are running multiple Kubernetes clusters, then to the appropriate Kubernetes clusters. So that is one. The second type of requirement, which is very popular and which is a mainstream in the networking world, is you want to look at the core TCP, HTTP, SSL parameters and then route the traffic. You want to see that a particular type of user agent, if it is mobile or web based, goes to a different type of a pod rather than the other pod. The customers also want to route traffic based on the SSL parameters, and so on. So these are the core application delivery tenets that are often not developed by the application developers. They are often delegated to the networking team, and that is where the networking team is in charge of automating these configurations through an external load balancer.
Sorry, let me just say that's common as we've seen over the years, Kamal. You can either you can write everything yourself as an application developer, but you don't want to. You want to keep that abstracted out. You don't want to have to do all the SSL decryption and manage all the keys yourself. You want to centralize that onto your ADC, right? So it seems that the story is the same, and even for modern applications as it was for older ones, but even more so, and even tighter integration with OpenShift is really driving that forward to make it better and easier for customers to use.
Exactly, and just to extend that story, next year and in the next 2 3 years, you'll start seeing PQC as well, post quantum cryptography. The developers would not want to take care of the post quantum cryptography kind of challenges. They would want an external trusted ADC to make sure that their applications are protected from these emerging threats as well. So that is the primary job of an application delivery controller, and that is where they expect the external ADC to take care of these things. But I don't want to only sort of silo this into the core application delivery controller use cases. I also want to say that a lot of things which are a part of the cloud native ecosystem, such as observability, such as automation, these are also now being fundamentally asked from external ADCs, and that is where customers want that the metrics and the logs and the traces from the ADC that is running outside the Kubernetes cluster should be streamed into the same backend observability infrastructure, either hosted on OpenShift or externally. And that is becoming earlier this was a soft requirement, but now this is becoming a very, very hard and a mandatory requirement, because if any component is not compliant to observability, then it sort of breaks the overall observability team's momentum, and they become slow.
So, kind of a question, just to, you've been explaining general application delivery and app modernization, specifically with NetScaler and OpenShift though. Is there any secret sauce there that's making it such a popular choice?
Yeah, so the secret sauce is when you actually log into the OpenShift platform, you'll go there and you'll search for operators, and that is where you'll see that's where you see that the NetScaler's core application delivery features have been automated in a OpenShift friendly manner. So a OpenShift operator can go there and then they can see that, okay, yeah, this is how I configure my application, and this is also how I can configure an external ADC. So they sort of get a familiar territory into which to configure the external load balancer. They have to definitely talk to the IT team and the networking team, because the ownership of the NetScaler is typically with the IT team. So that's one thing. But we are also seeing that some of the core application delivery functionality is expected inside the OpenShift cluster. So there is this sort of spreading of the capability of EDC outside the cluster and inside the cluster. And typically inside the cluster, the OpenShift admins would like to control those capabilities, and that is where in near future I'll talk about how NetScaler's different form factors help the OpenShift admins to spread and delegate these ADC capabilities outside the cluster and inside the cluster.
And I was just going to say, like, I think like that's one of the, if I could add like my own spin on what I think this the special sauce is like, I think that's what makes like OpenShift as a platform, the ability to have all these different things out of the box, be able to be a multi-use tool. And then also with NetScaler, where you've got an appliance or a virtualized software that also is just chock full of tools. And I'm a little biased because I also used to work with Citrix and also used to sell NetScaler. But like, I think that's great. Like we used to call it like the Swiss Army knife of application delivery controllers, because it can do everything, observability wise, load balancing wise, global server load balancing wise, web app firewall, and the whole observability piece, like it's huge, right? And so when we think about tools that are completely great to go right out of the box, like OpenShift and NetScaler, it's like peanut butter and chocolate. It's like, peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. So I think that's great. And also to be able to meet the customer where they're at, right? So NetScaler has the various different form factors. So if you're looking to do it in a virtualized environment, you've got the VPX appliance. If you're looking to do it in a containerized environment, you've got the CPX appliance. If you're looking to go bare metal, you've got BLX, right? So you can really, and also I would be remiss not to mention the hardware appliances, right? To be able to do, keep me honest, Komal, I believe it's the TLS encryption off the actual server and the infrastructure that it's running on, and instead put it on the actual appliance itself, right? So you're really meeting the customer where they're at, which is exactly the mentality of OpenShift as well. And then you can also deploy those wherever you want to, which is also the mentality of OpenShift. So when you think about the secret sauce, I think it's like we're just complementary solutions, right? That are like our main goals are they're specifically defined to meet the customer where they're at and ensure that they've got the best performance regardless of where their business wants to go. Cloud, on premises, who cares? It doesn't matter at that point, right? Because you're able to do everything that you want to do consistently, right? That's a huge key piece too, is having the same look and feel across the different formats from a NetScaler perspective, and the same thing around that OpenShift side. So it's just a very complementary solution altogether.
I think you're right. I think that operational consistency, especially when we come to something that's so complex as cloud native applications and microservices, it is very complex. And hence, and I'm glad you brought it up, Komal, about the observability. It's crucial in this type of containerized world, maybe less so in the monolithic days, but nowadays you've got to know what's going on if you want to troubleshoot something when it goes wrong, and it will, because it's a complex environment. And so let me just shift this on. So this is great, and it certainly tells our audience of the benefits of NetScaler and OpenShift and why they're better together. They share a philosophy. That's great. But the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. So perhaps you can share some customer use cases with the audience that highlight some of the advantages that we've discussed without breaking any confidences, of course. Perhaps, Giri, you'd like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. So we do have, a case study here where one of the large vendors of, positioning software and folks like, so they're using SDX today for VMs, load balancing into the CPX in order to direct the application traffic. So you really have load balancing, content switching. You have routing traffic via layer 7 parameters, like was mentioned by Komal before, TLS encryption and decryption, as well as web app firewall, right? So you have all of these capabilities that they're using for to operate NetScaler on OpenShift. And in addition to that, the Komal mentioned observability. Jason mentioned that this is very key, right? In these complex environments where observability is a key factor for the business to uh, have visibility into these complex environments, all the way from the application layer down to the infrastructure layer. This customer is really standardized on Prometheus, Kafka, Elasticsearch, and so they really want all of their components across their environment to basically stream their logs into these platforms so that they can have that unified observability across their whole stack. And so that's exactly what they're doing. And again, it's no surprise that OpenShift supports out of the box things like Prometheus and Elasticsearch and things like that. And so it becomes very complementary. So this customer can now have OpenShift events and logs, stream that into this stack, observability stack, as well as have NetScaler kind of have these events kind of stream into this observability stack, and really that contributes to that overall observability, which is a key component. So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's I'm glad you brought that up, because I mean, NetScaler, we all know how fantastic it is, and the telemetry data that it can bring that you wouldn't normally get without a very complex setup with agents everywhere. And NetScaler brings so much just out of its own box, just because it's always done it, and feeding that into an observability stack, and then feeding the rest of the stuff from the OpenShift environment into that as well, allows you to correlate and look for patterns and so on and so forth. I think that's absolutely crucial, and your customers obviously doing well with the stack, using NetScaler to deliver and secure, and using the OpenShift to deploy, to develop and deploy. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and there's also another customer as well. I don't want to belabor the point around hybrid platforms, because I feel like I've mentioned that quite a few times, but there is a real world example of a logistics organization out of the Southeast that specifically wanted to use OpenShift. They were leveraging OpenShift on premises, and they were leveraging OpenShift in one of the hyperscalers. So really accessing and unlocking the potential of a hybrid environment. And really what they wanted to do as well was use a similar feature from a load balancing organization for their application delivery. And they specifically chose NetScaler, right? Specifically to do load balancing within the applications within OpenShift, but then also do load balancing across the different data centers. So into the Azure platform and then onto on-premises as well. And if I'm not mistaken, they've got virtual machines that are in front of the infrastructure in the hyperscaler, and then they've also got appliances in front of the OpenShift environment on premises as well. So they're connecting and speaking. And so if one were to go down on premises, they would be able to back it up and point folks to the Azure location. So again, I don't want to belabor the point around hybrid, but I mean, it's a real use case and it's a real example that customers are using every day.
John, don't be ashamed of belaboring the point around hybrid. It's where the businesses go, right? It's that important to business, that operational consistency, the ability to be flexible about what they do, when they do it, as their business needs change. That is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to and I know the customer deployments that John and Giri have mentioned, and there are several such customers who are actually using the same principles. So those are not an exception at all. Uh, I, what these customers typically say that, okay, I have taken a decision to be hybrid, uh, but I do not want to re-architect my application because that is going to be really cost intensive. Okay,
Mhm.
so I want to keep the application as much as possible the same on-prem and on public cloud, and that is why I want to keep the other packaging around the application also similar. Okay, and I don't want to change the configuration of my firewall, my load balancers, my database when I go from on-prem to public cloud. And that is where they've seen that these operators that we've built for OpenShift, where the experience on on-prem and on public cloud is absolutely same. And then now you have got these two different, distinct but very similar environments. You also want to route traffic across these two for disaster recovery and for resilience purpose. And that is where the core application delivery capabilities like global server load balancing of NetScaler comes into picture, so that the same application, it is hosted on-prem and public cloud, but the customer experience remains the same while you are increasing the overall scale of your application.
Yeah, and it also comes down to cost. I know there was a customer that I was speaking with, and they do global life and limb services, they call them, with using GPS, and it obviously would make sense to position their application deployments close to users as they can get. And they looked at cloud for this, but it worked out to be expensive. So they decided to build their own based on OpenShift, because then they would have the option to move it wherever they needed to, and NetScaler to provide that global server load balancing, exactly as you just said, Komal. And then I think they were just doing it outside with NetScaler outside the clusters to start with, and then they moved it inside the clusters because it was easier to manage the NetScalers in there than the open source components, which we've discussed, Giri,
Yeah.
already. So I think that there's a lot of value in the things that we do.
Yeah, and Jason, I want to talk about that point where NetScaler is outside the cluster and inside the cluster as well, because uh, we we get questions why the same ADC is outside and inside, and that's a very interesting point, and this is based on some of our customer deployments. It's actually that the customers need some of the ADC capabilities to be outside the cluster and inside the cluster. It's because their teams are asking that. For example, let's say one of our largest customers, they were hosting their overall certificates, TLS certificates and keys on the NetScaler, which is outside the cluster, and that is according to their compliance and security requirement. But they also wanted to have one very specific subdomain hosted inside the OpenShift cluster. So they said that, okay, this is an experimental project. We do not want to really go through the whole hoops. So they just wanted that flexibility that this particular project can be host the certificates inside the OpenShift clusters or not. On a similar note, they wanted to say that, okay, we want to host one more version of the application, and the layer 7 policies of this application we want to control inside the cluster only, because the developer knows about that very well, and we do not want to offload it to the IT team. So for these kind of use cases where you want different kind of delegation of ADC capabilities outside the cluster and inside the cluster, typically customers ask for a proxy like NetScaler CPX to be running inside the cluster. And that gives agility to your teams. You do not have, for every small, minute thing, you do not have to go to your external IT networking team to get that configuration on the ADC. You also have a proxy inside the cluster so that you can config so that you can control your layer 7, SSL, TCP policies inside the cluster as well, while you're not breaking the overall security and the compliance posture of your organization. So CPX, which is running inside the OpenShift cluster, another NetScaler version, that gives flexibilities for these two teams to be uh, independent of each other while not breaking any security or compliance reasons.
Awesome. Thank you guys all for that great, color through the stories, real life examples. And we've been talking for a while now, and it's at this stage we usually ask our guests for a bold prediction on the future. So, three guests, I'd like to hear maybe three predictions on what you guys think is coming down the pipe. And this can be related to today's topic, or it can be about anything in IT in general. Gary, why don't
I'll go
we?
first. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I'll go first. By the way, prediction is a very fragile business as far as I'm concerned. So I was took a gander at a prediction website, and I'm not going to go in there for today, but sticking to the topic for today, right? I think things like ingress, load balancing, routing, all of these are core NetScaler topics, and operating on OpenShift. I'm going to say instead of APIs and API gateways, we are going to be talking about AI gateways, right? And that's what's going to probably come down the pipe. So that's my prediction.
I'll go
John?
with mine on the same thread of AI. And I don't know. I actually don't know what like the latest statistics are around like how quickly organizations are adopting AI. But my major prediction is going to be a little bit bold, and usually I'm conservative with my predictions. But I'm going to say that within the next 5 years, you're going to see organizations. You're going to see roughly around 70% of organizations have AI in their environments in some form or fashion, whether that's applications or developing their own AI applications in house.
Mm.
My guess or my big bold prediction is 70% within the next 5 years, which I think is above and beyond what some of the other predictions are because AI is expensive. So,
Good point about it being expensive. I would have said it would have been faster. They'll be using AI in some way, shape, or form well before 5 years. I think even a higher percentage of that. But their own version of the AI, that's a different question because of the cost, I think.
Yeah. So, coming closer to the NetScaler world, about the predictions for the next few years, I would split my prediction into two categories. One is near-term things that are going to happen, which are imminent, and then things which are slightly farther into the future. So, in the near term, I see that because there are so many regulated industries, customers who are going to use OpenShift, they are going to now not need just ADC capabilities on one cluster, but multiple clusters, but not just one zone, but across multiple zones. That is what we keep hearing. A lot of customers want to scale up from one cluster to multiple clusters. So that is one. So multi-cluster routing, global server, load balancing, routing across multiple clusters, regions is going to be important, and that is going to become mainstream in the near future. In the mid-term future, I see that the ingress itself will be getting a facelift. The Kubernetes community has decided that they will use uh, the successor of Ingress, which is called the Gateway API, not
Mm.
API Gateway, but Gateway API, as if there was less complexity in this world. But yeah, so Gateway API will become the new way in which application developers and the networking team and the security teams will be interacting with each other, and they will own their own components of the Gateway API, and that is where the overall application management and the application delivery will become streamlined, and the current issues that the operators and the networking team members have will sort of start to fizzle out, and hopefully we'll start seeing more discussion around the AI gateway, as Giri was saying.
Thank you all very much. Okay, so let me just try to summarize what we've been through today for the audience, right? So today we've been privileged to have three special guests on the show with a wealth of experience in IT and, of course, application modernization. So we thank you for that. And we've explored why customers find cloud-native applications so appealing, with their decoupled architecture being so easy to update and expand individual components. But of course, that architecture depends on a great management system for enhanced success. And that certainly seems to be what customers are getting with the Red Hat OpenShift. It's not just an engine, it's the whole car and including all the service stations and everything that goes with it. Its popularity is deserved and founded on its great feature set and consistency across environments that offers customers the flexibility to deploy their applications to suit their business requirements and change that as their requirements change. And that same story holds true with NetScaler. And we've discussed this before, but comprehensive app delivery and security, feature sets integrated with the market leading application management system OpenShift to provide operational consistency across all environments. And we've discussed 3 customer cases here who are all utilizing the power of OpenShift and NetScaler to deliver their business applications to remain agile and stay ahead of their competitors. So if your business is looking for the right application deployment and delivery infrastructure, you should absolutely consider Red Hat OpenShift and NetScaler together.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that summary, Jason. And then I also want to thank our guests for joining us today. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our audience who is watching this today and for tuning into this episode of the NetScaler Podcast. You can find the audio version of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Citrix community website. You can also find the video version of this interview on YouTube. And if you're here, leave us a comment on what you thought and maybe a like for the next one. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.